I was drowning in Lake Marbury when I heard my husband tell my sister, "Just hold her down a little longer, Renee. The paperwork won't sign itself." Then I opened my eyes in my own bed, 90 days in the past, and I understood exactly what I had to become. My name is Mara Voss. I was 34 years old, a marketing director at a mid-size ad firm in Charleston, South Carolina, and I had spent 6 years married to a man named Derek Colton, who I genuinely believed loved me. That belief cost me everything, right up until the moment it saved my life. Derek and I met at a fundraiser for the Low Country Children's Hospital in October 2019. He was handsome in that clean-cut, country club way, blazer, boat shoes, a laugh that made strangers feel like old friends. He worked in commercial real estate, or claimed to, and within 8 months he'd moved into my townhouse on Rutledge Avenue and started calling it our place, even though my name was the only one on the deed. My sister, Renee Voss, was 2 years younger than me and had never held a job longer than 14 months. I'd paid off $19,000 of her credit card debt in 2021 after she swore, crying on my kitchen floor, that she'd hit rock bottom. I co-signed her car loan. I let her live with us for 4 months when her lease fell through. I loved her the uncomplicated way you love someone you grew up sharing a bedroom with, the way that doesn't ask questions. I didn't know Derek and Renee had been sleeping together since the spring of 2023. I didn't know they'd taken out a $2.4 million life insurance policy on me through Meridian Life and Casualty in November of that year, with Derek listed as primary beneficiary and Renee as contingent. I signed what I thought were refinancing documents for the townhouse. Derek told me it was boring bank stuff and I believed him, because 6 years of marriage teaches you which lies are worth double-checking and which ones you let slide for the sake of peace. The peace killed me. Literally. On a Saturday in late March, Derek suggested a weekend trip to his family's cabin on Lake Marbury, 40 minutes outside the city. Just the two of us, he said, to reconnect. Renee happened to already be up there with her boyfriend, Colin, who I'd later learn didn't exist. He was a cover story so she could be present without suspicion. We went kayaking at dusk. Derek capsized us near the deep channel, laughing like it was an accident, and when I came up gasping he grabbed the back of my life vest and yanked it off me before shoving me under. I remember the cold shock of lake water in my sinuses, the burn in my chest, his hand flat on my scalp holding me down with the calm patience of a man weighing produce at a grocery store. I remember Renee's voice, muffled through water and panic, saying the words that would define the rest of my existence. "Just hold her down a little longer, Derek. The paperwork won't sign itself." I died knowing exactly who killed me and why. I woke up gasping, not in the lake, not in a hospital bed, but in my own bedroom on Rutledge Avenue, sunlight slicing through the blinds, Derek snoring beside me like nothing had ever happened. The clock on my nightstand read January 4th. 83 days before the lake. 83 days before my own murder. I sat up so fast the room spun. My heart was a fist against my ribs. I remembered everything, the insurance policy, the affair, the cabin, the water, Renee's voice underwater telling Derek to finish the job. Every second of my death was carved into me like a brand, and yet here I was, alive, younger by 3 months, with a second chance nobody gets and nobody deserves less than the people who'd take it from me twice. I never figured out the mechanics of it. Maybe it was the shock of drowning. Maybe some cosmic clerical error decided a woman who'd been so thoroughly betrayed deserved a redo. I didn't spend much time wondering. I spent my time understanding the one rule that mattered. I remembered everything from the life that was stolen from me, and nobody else did. Derek didn't remember holding my head under the water. Renee didn't remember the $2.4 million motive she'd whispered into a lake at dusk. To them, it was still January. To me, it was a war that had already been fought and lost once, and I intended to win the rematch. Lying there next to the man who would drown me in 11 weeks, I made myself a promise. I was done being someone's soft place to land, and from that morning forward, every ounce of love I had left would be spent only on myself. I didn't cry. I didn't shake him awake and scream. I lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling fan, and felt something in me go quiet and cold, like a furnace shutting off room by room until only the pilot light remained. The old Mara would have confronted him, demanded answers, given him the chance to explain. The old Mara was dead. She'd died in Lake Marbury with lake water in her lungs and her sister's voice in her ears. I was something else now, something that smiled at breakfast and took notes in silence. I didn't tell Derek I knew. I didn't tell Renee. Instead, I became the most agreeable version of myself either of them had ever seen, and I used that agreeableness as camouflage while I built a case that would bury them both without my fingerprints anywhere on the shovel. The first thing I did was call Elena Cho, a estate and insurance attorney I'd worked with years earlier on a workplace dispute. I told her I wanted a confidential audit of any financial documents attached to my name, policies, refinances, anything. Just a feeling, I told her, which wasn't a lie so much as a 3 months early truth. 2 weeks later she called me back, her voice careful. Mara, there's a $2.4 million term life policy taken out on you through Meridian Life and Casualty. Application filed November 14th. Your signature's on it, but the beneficiary designation was altered 8 days after your alleged signing date. Someone amended it without your consent. Who filed the amendment? Derek Colton. Notarized by a Renee Voss. I remember sitting in my car in the parking garage under my office on Meeting Street, gripping the wheel, feeling nothing but a strange, terrible clarity. Don't do anything yet, I told Elena. I need this airtight. I need more than a paper trail. I need them on record. Next, I hired a private investigator named Frank Della Rosa, a retired Charleston PD detective who now ran a 2-man surveillance firm out of a strip mall office on Savannah Highway. Frank had kind eyes and a permanent 5 o'clock shadow, and he didn't ask why a seemingly happy newlywed adjacent wife wanted her husband and sister watched. He just quoted me $175 an hour plus expenses and got to work. By early February, Frank had photographs. Derek's truck parked outside Renee's apartment on Line Street at 11:40 p.m. on a Tuesday, staying until 2 a.m. Text message screenshots pulled from a burner phone Renee kept badly hidden in a showbox. Derek had access to it, apparently, because he'd once used her phone to order takeout and hadn't logged out of the messaging app on his own laptop that syncs to iCloud, a mistake that would end up costing him everything. The texts were worse than I expected. Worse than the cabin, worse than the water. Derek, once the policy's active 2 years we're clear. No contestability period after that. Renee, I still feel sick about this. Derek, you'll feel less sick with your half of $2.4 million Vegas condo, remember? You promised. Renee, I know. I just love her. In a weird way. Derek, love doesn't pay my Sub-Zero repair bill, babe. I read that exchange sitting alone in my car outside a Whole Foods on Savannah Highway, and I didn't cry. I laughed. It was a short, ugly laugh, and it scared me a little, how easily it came out. I didn't move out. I didn't confront them. Instead, I quietly began transferring my personal savings, $61,000 I'd built up separately from our joint accounts, into a new account under my maiden name at a credit union Derek didn't know existed. I changed the beneficiary on my actual, legitimate retirement accounts. I photographed every document in our shared filing cabinet on my phone and backed them up to a cloud drive Elena Cho had access to. I started documenting Derek's moods, his absences, his lies, in a private notes app disguised under a folder labeled recipes. I also went to see Detective Sam Reyes, a homicide investigator I remembered from a life he hadn't lived through yet, a life where he'd have eventually investigated my death and, I suspected, found nothing conclusive, because staged drowning accidents rarely leave clean evidence. This time, I got ahead of it. I walked into the Charleston PD substation on Lockwood Drive and told Sam Reyes I had reason to believe my husband and sister were planning to kill me for a life insurance payout, and I had documentation. Sam Reyes was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a salt and pepper mustache and the tired patience of someone who'd heard every domestic complaint under the sun. He didn't laugh me out of the room. He read the texts. He read Elena's report on the falsified beneficiary amendment. He looked up at me with an expression I'll never forget, something between pity and respect. Mrs. Colton, he said, if even half of this is what it looks like, you need to leave that house tonight. Not yet, I told him. If I run now, they'll cover their tracks. I need them to think I don't know anything. I need them to try. He didn't like it. He made me sign a statement, gave me his direct cell number, and told me if anything felt wrong, I was to call him first, not 911, him. I want eyes on this from the start, he said. I didn't tell him the start had already happened once, in a version of March he'd never get to live. By the second week of March, I had leverage most people spend a lifetime never acquiring, a documented financial motive, a falsified legal document, recorded infidelity, and a police detective already briefed and waiting. All I needed now was for Derek to try the lake again, because I intended to let him, on my terms, with cameras rolling. I suggested the cabin trip myself this time. I watched Derek's face when I brought it up over dinner at a restaurant on East Bay Street, watched the flicker of surprise and then the slow, satisfied smile of a man who thought his wife had just handed him her own death sentence. "That's a great idea, babe," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand, the same hand that in another timeline had been on top of my skull, pressing down. "Just the two of us." "Actually," I said, "let's make it a family thing. Invite Renee. It's been ages." He didn't even blink. That's how little either of them thought of me, that I would casually invite the woman sleeping with my husband to witness my death and not suspect a thing. What Derek didn't know was that Frank Della Rosa had a contact who did marine equipment installs, and that same contact had, 3 days before our trip, serviced the cabin's dock and kayak storage, embedding 2 waterproof cameras with long battery life into the boathouse rafters, one aimed at the dock, one at the shoreline. What Derek also didn't know was that Detective Sam Reyes had a friend on the county sheriff's department for the Lake District, and that friend had agreed, off the books, to have a boat doing routine patrol in the channel that Saturday evening. We arrived at the cabin on a Friday in late March. The same weekend, I realized with a strange, hollow chill, as the weekend I'd died in the life before this one. Renee showed up Saturday afternoon, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, hugging me a little too tightly at the door. "I missed you," she said, and I felt the old ache of loving her flicker somewhere beneath the ice I'd built over the last 3 months. "I missed you too," I said, and meant it, which made what came next easier and harder in equal measure. That evening, Derek suggested the kayaks. I said yes. I put on the life vest myself this time, cinched tight, and I made sure to mention, loudly, cheerfully, to both of them on the dock, "I finally learned to swim properly this winter. Took lessons at the Y. Guess all those Tuesday nights paid off, huh?" It wasn't true. But it planted a seed of doubt I needed Derek to carry with him out onto that water, a small itch of maybe this won't be as easy as last time, even though he had no memory of a last time. Call it instinct on my part. Call it poetry. We paddled out near the same deep channel. The sun was low, throwing long gold light across the water, the same beautiful, indifferent light that had watched me die once already. Derek maneuvered his kayak closer to mine, and I watched his hand drift toward my hull with the same lazy, practiced calm I remembered from the lake water closing over my head. "Hey," he said, smiling, "you know I love you, right?" "I know," I said. "I love you too." He tipped my kayak. The cold hit me exactly the way I remembered, and for one terrifying half-second I was back in that other death, lungs seizing, his hand already reaching for my vest strap. But this time, when his fingers closed around the strap, a spotlight cut across the water from the sheriff's patrol boat idling 40 yards out, and a voice through a bullhorn cut through the dusk, "Charleston County Sheriff. Step away from her. Hands where we can see them." Derek froze. Renee, on the shore, dropped her wine glass on the dock boards, and I heard it shatter even over the boat engine. I want to tell you I felt triumphant. I didn't. I felt the water close cold around my ribs one more time and I felt, mostly, tired. The specific exhaustion of a woman who has now drowned twice in the same lake because of the same 2 people, once for real and once as bait. They pulled me out. They pulled Derek out, cuffed him on the dock while he was still soaking wet, his boat shoes squeaking pathetically against the boards. Renee tried to run for her car and made it exactly 11 feet before Sam Reyes, who'd arrived by unmarked sedan with 2 uniformed officers, stepped directly into her path. "Renee Voss," he said, "you're being detained pending an investigation into attempted murder and insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent." She looked at me across the dock, mascara running, her voice cracking into something almost childlike. Mara, please, it's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. My voice came out flat and dry, like something scraped clean. "You told him to hold me under. I heard you." "That's not, how could you possibly?" I didn't answer. Some things you don't explain. You just let them sit in the silence and rot. The trial took 4 months. Meridian Life and Casualties Fraud Division froze the policy the moment Elena Cho filed the falsified document complaint, and their internal investigator, a methodical woman named Patricia Hale, testified that the amended beneficiary form had been notarized using a stamp registered to Renee Voss but stored, according to the notary registry, at an address Renee hadn't lived at in 2 years, a detail that gutted whatever flimsy defense their lawyer tried to build. Derek pled to attempted murder and insurance fraud conspiracy, 12 years, eligible for parole after 8. Renee took a plea deal for conspiracy and fraud. She cooperated, in the end, hoping cooperation would soften things, 3 years, most of which she'd serve at a women's facility outside Columbia. I visited Derek exactly once, at the Charleston County Detention Center, before his transfer upstate. I didn't have to. Elena told me I didn't owe him closure. But I wanted to see his face one more time without a lake between us. He looked smaller behind the glass, in the orange jumpsuit, his hair unwashed, his charm evaporated into something pale and desperate. "Mara," he said, picking up the phone on his side. "Baby, I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe that. It was Renee's idea, she..." "Stop," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I heard you, Derek. In the water. I heard you tell her to hold me down longer so the paperwork would sign itself. Don't insult what's left of my intelligence by lying to my face about whose idea it was." He blinked, confused, like a man trying to remember a conversation he'd never actually had, because in this timeline, he hadn't. Not yet. Not the way I remembered it. But I remembered it perfectly, and that was enough for both of us. "How do you," he started. "It doesn't matter how," I said. "What matters is you're going to spend the next 8 years in a cell thinking about $2.4 million you're never going to see, and I'm going to spend them exactly how I want, which is without you in a single second of it. Mara, please, I still love you." "You loved the payout," I said. "I was just the paperwork." I set the phone back in its cradle, gently, and I walked out without looking back, and I felt the last cold thread connecting me to that man simply snap, clean and quiet, like a fishing line giving way. Renee wrote me letters from the county jail before her transfer, 7 of them, each one longer and more frantic than the last. I read the first 2. I burned the rest, unread, in the fire pit behind my new house, because some doors, once you understand what's on the other side of them, are better left permanently shut. Elena Cho and I became close over those months, the way you do with someone who's helped save your life without ever making it about themselves, and somewhere in the process of rebuilding my finances and my name, she introduced me to her business partner, a sharp, quiet man named Julian Marsh who ran a boutique wealth protection firm on Broad Street. Julian had lost his own wife to cancer 3 years earlier and carried himself with the specific gentleness of someone who understood grief without needing it explained to him. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't tell me I was strong, or brave, or inspiring, the words people love to hand you like consolation prizes. He just sat across from me at a coffee shop on King Street one afternoon in September and said, "You built an entire legal case against 2 people who loved you, without letting either of them see it coming. That's not survival instinct, Mara. That's strategy." Something in me, some frozen room I thought would stay shut forever, cracked open a little at that. Not because he flattered me. Because he saw me clearly, and didn't flinch. I sold the townhouse on Rutledge Avenue in October. I used part of the settlement from Meridian's fraud division. They paid out damages for negligent underwriting once Elena's discovery process exposed how easily the policy had slipped through, to buy a smaller house near Colonial Lake, just for me, with a kitchen I designed myself and not one single Sub-Zero refrigerator. I got a promotion at work, Senior VP of Strategy, the following spring. I started, slowly, letting Julian into the parts of my life I'd spent a year guarding like a fortress. I think about the lake sometimes. Not with fear anymore, with something closer to gratitude, which surprised me the first time I felt it. That water killed the version of me who mistook loyalty for love and love for safety. It handed me back a version of myself that knows exactly how far kindness should extend before it becomes a weapon someone else can use against you. I drowned once to learn who I really was, and I came back breathing fire instead of water. If this story of betrayal, rebirth, and quiet revenge kept you hooked, hit like, share it with someone who loves a plot twist, and subscribe for more Reborn drama stories.